Hello again, and welcome to the second part of my mini-series on Atlantis. As we saw in the first video, the Atlantis story comes from two dialogues of Plato, which describe a vast and powerful civilization drowned in the distant past. Modern classicists agree that Plato invented Atlantis in the service of a philosophical parable. But over the centuries, there have been many people who wanted to believe that there was some kernel of truth in Plato's story. There is no sign that anyone who actually knew Plato thought Atlantis was real. That idea emerged later, as philosophers studying and commenting on Plato's works evolved various theories about their meaning. By late antiquity, there were three schools of thought. Some philosophers theorized that the Atlantis story was literal truth. Others regarded it as an outright fable. Still others saw it as a more or less convoluted allegory. All this, however, was purely academic. No Greek or Roman ever went looking for Atlantis. Atlantis resurfaced after the European discovery of the New World. Several scholars suggested that America was Plato's Atlantis, and that the Native Americans were descendants of the Atlanteans. Others speculated that Atlantis had been a land bridge between America and Europe. One of these was the Jesuit polymath Athanasius Kircher, who thought the Canary Islands were the shattered remains of a lost continent, and commissioned a famous map showing Atlantis in the center of the Atlantic Ocean. The most comprehensive work of early modern Atlantology was produced by the Swedish scholar Olof Rudbeck, who deployed a heady blend of primitive archaeology and misapplied linguistics to demonstrate that Atlantis had actually been located in Sweden. Perhaps foreseeably, Rudbeck's 3,000-page manifesto was much more popular in Sweden than elsewhere. Over the next 150 years, various and variously unconvincing attempts were made to locate Atlantis in places as far afield as the Andes, the Arctic, and the Yucatan. The public paid little attention. It was only in the late 19th century that belief in Atlantis went mainstream, and this was almost entirely due to a single man, an American named Ignatius Donnelly. By the time he wrote the book that made Atlantis a household name, Donnelly had suffered through several careers. He had abandoned his practice as a lawyer, gone bankrupt as a land speculator, and been voted out of Congress. At first sight, his book on Atlantis seemed no more likely to succeed. It was almost 500 pages long, full of references to obscure scientific literature, and written on a topic that most people had barely heard of. But when it appeared in 1882, it was a runaway bestseller. The book became so popular, in fact, that the theme of the 1883 Mardi Gras celebration in New Orleans was Atlantis. Donnelly's book would go through dozens of printings in the next decade alone. It remains in print today. Atlantis, Donnelly claimed, had been a large island off the coast of Spain. The Atlanteans had invented writing, bronzeworking, and rather a lot else before colonizing most of the world. After a disaster destroyed the island of Atlantis, the survivors preserved memories, often disguised as myths, of their great and vanished civilization. The pyramids of Egypt and Central America, the Phoenician alphabet and Mayan hieroglyphs, the Garden of Eden, Mount Olympus, and much, much more were all, Donnelly insisted, legacies of Atlantis. This, of course, was completely wrong. Even in 1882, it was clear that there was no real evidence, geological, archaeological, or otherwise, for a lost continent or prehistoric supercivilization. But the idea of an ancient empire lost beneath the waves was too fascinating to ignore. Many came to believe in Atlantis. Many still do. Modern Atlantis enthusiasts tend to share a few basic assumptions. Most agree that Atlantis was an advanced seafaring civilization which flourished in the twilight before recorded history and was destroyed by a cataclysm that flooded its heartland. On these articles of faith are founded countless theories, none very compelling. Perhaps the most remarkable of Donnelly's many successors was an American psychic named Edgar Cayce, known to his followers as the Sleeping Prophet. Cayce surprised many of his clients with the news that they'd enjoyed past lives in Atlantis, which he described as a world-spanning ancient empire with advanced technology powered, you guessed it, by crystals. The Atlanteans had destroyed themselves through overindulgence in crystal-driven superweapons, but records of their great civilization, Cayce insisted, were hidden beneath the Sphinx in Egypt, in the Mayan ruins of the Yucatan, and among the coral reefs of the Caribbean. A few hopeful souls are still seeking the impossible truth in these unlikely places. The most notorious Atlantis hunters of the 20th century were the scholars of the Ahnenerbe, a Nazi think tank dedicated to researching and publicizing the Aryan roots of German civilization. Heinrich Himmler, who founded the Ahnenerbe as an arm of the SS, was obsessed with the idea that a highly advanced Nordic empire had existed before the dawn of recorded time, and came to be convinced that the homeland of this empire was the island later known as Atlantis. Nazi scholars were sent to various corners of the world to gather evidence for the Nordic roots of civilization, and an expedition was planned to discover Atlantean remains in the Canaries. The Second World War, however, put an end to the Ahnenerbe's vicious brand of pseudoscience. Over the past 70 years, countless theories have been proposed about the location and fate of Atlantis. Most of these ignore history, science, and everything between. A bare handful are more careful. But only one has been taken seriously by classicists: the theory that Plato's Atlantis story was partly inspired by a catastrophic Bronze Age eruption. For that theory, tune in next time, when we'll conclude our expedition to Atlantis. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching.